Amber, successful, don't be ridiculous. My mother's words, laced with disdain, echoed in the opulent ballroom. Crystal chandeliers cast shimmering light across the perfectly coiffed heads and champagne flute smiles. My stomach dropped. Grace's wedding. Every detail screamed perfection, a pointed contrast to my perceived failures. My hands trembled as I adjusted Leo's tiny tie. News flashed on my phone, Medova's FDA approval. Inside, I was screaming. Outside, I remained composed. Ever felt unseen, unappreciated? You have to see what happens next. Like and subscribe for the ultimate underdog story because, honey, this facade is about to crumble. September 4, 2012. The date etched in my memory. It was the day my acceptance letter from Stanford arrived, a beacon of hope amidst relentless financial strain. My parents, however, saw it differently. Grace needs the tuition money more, Amber, my father had announced, his voice devoid of empathy. He continued, she has potential. You're better suited for something practical. The something practical he envisioned involved a minimum wage job and a life perpetually in Grace's shadow. The sting of his words lingered, a constant reminder of my perceived worthlessness. Christmas that year was a stark contrast. Grace received a brand new laptop, sleek and powerful, while I was gifted a second-hand textbook, its pages dog-eared and worn. While they celebrated Grace's bright future, I silently packed my meager belongings, the weight of their rejection heavy on my shoulders. She needs every advantage, my mother cooed, oblivious to the silent tears streaming down my face. Their blatant favoritism felt like a physical blow. The final straw came months later. Stranded, I borrowed my roommate's phone to reach out. I can't, Amber, my mother stated, her voice cold. We're managing Grace's expenses. My phone went dead. The buzzing in my ear was deafening. At that moment, I knew I was truly alone, abandoned to navigate a world that seemed determined to crush me. It was then I vowed to build a life so extraordinary, their dismissal would become their greatest regret. The streets were a labyrinth of shadows and despair. Each night was a battle against the gnawing hunger, the biting cold seeping through threadbare clothes. The stench of stale garbage clung to everything, a constant reminder of my precarious existence. But amidst the hardship, a fire ignited, fueled by a fierce determination to prove them wrong. No warmth, no safety, no reprieve. I'd survive. My first milestone came unexpectedly. A professor, recognizing my potential despite my disheveled appearance, offered me a research assistant position. It wasn't much, but it was a lifeline. The lab became my sanctuary, the beakers and microscopes my only companions. The work was challenging, demanding every ounce of my intellect, but I thrived in the environment, fueled by a desire to excel. Years blurred into a relentless cycle of study, work, and sacrifice. My second milestone was the publication of my research paper. The recognition validated my efforts, silencing the voices that had once whispered doubts. I secured grants, attracting the attention of investors who believed in my vision. Building Medova was the third milestone, a testament to my resilience and unwavering belief in myself. The decision to keep my success hidden was deliberate, strategic. I wanted to be valued for my accomplishments, not my family connections. Their constant dismissal fueled my ambition, their indifference sharpening my resolve. Amber, a CEO, preposterous. I imagined my mother's reaction, a bitter smile playing on my lips. It was a shield, protecting me from their inevitable attempts to capitalize on my success. The tension at the wedding was palpable. The air crackled with unspoken words, hidden resentments. As Daniel's eyes narrowed, a silent question forming on his lips, I knew the revelation was imminent. The carefully constructed facade was about to crumble, exposing the truth I had guarded for so long. The silence was deafening. Suddenly my Aunt Carol, ever the busybody, swooped in. Amber, darling, you look different. Her eyes scanned my designer dress, lingered on my wedding ring. Successful, even. A wave of nausea washed over me. Here it comes, I steeled myself. Years of hiding, of meticulous planning were about to be undone. It's been a journey, Carol, I replied, my voice carefully neutral. I glanced at Michael, his hand subtly squeezing mine. Strength, I needed it. I took a deep breath. Grace, sensing the shift in attention, rushed over, her smile brittle. Amber works part-time, she interjected, her voice laced with condescension. Something with marketing, wasn't it? The lie hung heavy in the air. The music swelled, a saccharine pop song that grated on my nerves. I excused myself to the restroom. Okay, Amber, I muttered to my reflection. Time to play the game. I mentally reviewed Medova's latest financials, the impact of our new surgical adhesive, the upcoming conference in Geneva. The details, once a source of pride, now felt like weapons. Walking back into the ballroom, I noticed my father beckoning me over. He hadn't spoken a word to me since I arrived. This was new. Progress, I braced myself. Amber, he began, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant, Grace tells me you dabbled in business. The word dabbled dripped with the same condescension I remembered so well. My stomach clenched. Here we go. Then Leo, bless his innocent heart, skipped over to Daniel, Grace's soon-to-be husband. My mommy went to Stanford too, she has lots of degrees. A pin could have dropped. Grace's face contorted, a fleeting flicker of panic crossing her features before she plastered on a strained smile. Daniel, however, froze, his eyes narrowing, a complex equation playing out behind them. The carefully constructed narrative of Grace's perfect life began to unravel. Stanford? Daniel asked, his gaze shifting between Grace and me. The subtle tension in his jaw betrayed his surprise. He'd been trying to secure a partnership with Medova for months. I took a measured breath, the years of suppressed anger simmering beneath the surface. Yes, Daniel, Stanford, bioengineering to be exact, followed by an MBA. The words hung in the air, sharp and precise. His eyes widened, comprehension dawning. But, Grace mentioned. He trailed off, the implication clear. Grace lied. The color drained from her face. Mommy is the CEO of Medova. Leo piped up again, beaming with pride. The bomb had dropped. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the distant clinking of glasses. My father's face turned a shade of puce. My mother gasped, clutching her chest. Grace stood frozen, her carefully curated world collapsing around her. Daniel's reaction was the most telling. His eyes flicked to me, then back to Grace, then back to me again, calculating, reassessing. He knew everything. Medova, he repeated, his voice barely a whisper. You're Amber Collins, CEO of Medova. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The medical tech firm he'd been desperately trying to connect with, the woman he'd been casually dismissing. I simply nodded, maintaining eye contact. That's right, Daniel. My voice was calm, controlled. A stark contrast to the chaos erupting around me. I watched Grace sink into a chair, her face buried in her hands. But Grace said, my father stammered, his face a mask of disbelief. He turned to Grace, his voice rising in anger. You told me you worked with Medova. It's complicated, Grace mumbled, her voice muffled by her hands. Complicated? You lied to me, Daniel exploded, his voice booming across the room. All eyes were on us now. The power had shifted. The air thickened with accusation and shame. I watched, detached, as their carefully constructed world crumbled. A small, almost imperceptible smile played on my lips. My moment had arrived. My mother, ever the pragmatist, was the first to recover. Amber, darling, why didn't you tell us? We're so proud. Her voice dripped with saccharine insincerity. I raised an eyebrow, my silence a pointed response. The hypocrisy was nauseating. Proud, I finally said, my voice low but firm. You laughed then, you're not laughing now. The statement hung in the air, a testament to my transformation. My father, attempting to salvage the situation, chimed in. Perhaps we could discuss potential family investments in Medova. His eyes gleamed with undisguised greed. I almost laughed. Investments, I echoed, a hint of amusement in my voice. Interesting, considering 11 years ago you couldn't invest in my education. Grace, desperate, pulled at Daniel's arm. Daniel, please, it's a misunderstanding. He shook her off, his gaze fixed on me. Amber, I apologize for my ignorance. Medova's work is groundbreaking. The desperation in his voice was palpable. He wanted my attention, my approval, my partnership. Indeed it is, I replied, my tone dismissive. Perhaps you should have done your research. My mother, sensing an opportunity, pressed on. Amber, surely you could help your sister. A position at Medova, I cut her off with a raised hand. Grace made her choices, I stated coldly. And so did I. Silence, the most powerful weapon of all. I let it hang, letting them stew in their regret. Then turning to Michael, I smiled. Shall we, darling? This party is becoming tiresome. As we walked away, I heard my father's voice, laced with desperation. Amber, wait, we need to talk. I paused, turning back to face them, my expression unreadable. There's nothing left to say, besides I'm rather busy, running a multi-million-dollar company. The scene was set: wealth, family, and a bitter-sweet revenge. I continued, however, since you insist. I paused for effect, drawing everyone's attention. There is something you should know. I could feel the heat rising in my face. My father, emboldened by my apparent willingness to engage, stepped forward. Yes, darling, anything, what can we do? He was practically salivating. The term darling was not in his vocabulary. I smiled. Medova's recent expansion required some strategic acquisitions. I paused again, savoring the moment. Daniel, ever the astute businessman, frowned slightly. Acquisitions? I wasn't aware. Indeed, I continued smoothly. One in particular is rather relevant to this gathering. I gestured vaguely around the ballroom, letting the anticipation build. Grace, her face pale and drawn, whispered, "What are you talking about, Amber?" I turned to her, my eyes hard. "Remember that loan you took out to start your boutique?" I used air quotes for emphasis. "The one your business has been struggling to repay for years." Her eyes widened in horror. "What about it?" "Well," I said, my voice dropping to a near whisper, "Medova acquired the holding company that owns that loan 6 months ago." Boom. The words were said and the tension filled the room. The color completely drained from Grace's face. She looked as if she was about to faint. My mother gasped, clutching her pearls. "What?" Grace stammered, her voice barely audible. That's impossible." "Oh, it's quite possible," I assured her, my voice dripping with saccharine sweetness. "In fact, the first payment is due next week." But we can't afford it," Grace wailed, tears streaming down her face. My father, realizing the implications, turned to me, his face pleading. "Amber, please, you wouldn't." I raised an eyebrow. "Wouldn't I? You taught me a valuable lesson, Father, about priorities, about who deserves investment." Daniel, understanding the full extent of my leverage, stared at me with a mixture of shock and admiration. He knew Grace's business was teetering on the brink of collapse. This loan was the only thing keeping it afloat. With Medova now in control, I held her entire future in my hands. You planned this all along," he said, his voice filled with awe. "Let's just say I'm a strategic thinker," I replied, my smile unwavering. "I always have been." My mother, desperate, stepped forward. "Amber, think of your sister. You can't do this to her." "She didn't think of me when she took my tuition money," I retorted, my voice cold. "This is simply karma." I turned back to Michael, linking my arm in his. "Now, darling, shall we? There's a scholarship fund waiting to be established." We left them standing there, speechless, their faces a mixture of shock, horror, and dawning realization. I had not only surpassed them, I controlled something they desperately needed: Grace's financial future. The silence, as we walked away, was deafening. It was the sound of their world, finally, and completely, crumbling. Months passed in a blur of board meetings and philanthropic endeavors. The Collins family made several clumsy attempts to reconnect. Invitations to dinner, heartfelt, though insincere, apologies flooding my inbox. I remained cordial but distant, granting them the occasional lunch, always at a neutral location, always with Michael present. It was enough to appease the social vultures, to quell the whispers, but not enough to truly mend the chasm that had widened between us. My life, however, transformed. The constant knot of anxiety that had resided in my stomach for years began to loosen. I slept better, ate more, and found myself smiling more often. The weight of the secret, the need to constantly guard my success, had vanished, replaced by a sense of lightness and freedom. I was no longer defined by their perception of me. Looking back, I realized the power wasn't just in financial success, but in the liberation from their judgment. The years spent proving them wrong had inadvertently led me to a place of self-acceptance, where my worth wasn't contingent on their approval. I had built something meaningful, something that extended far beyond the confines of my family's expectations. In the end, it wasn't about revenge, but about reclaiming my narrative. The scholarship fund, established in my name, became a symbol of that reclamation, a testament to the power of resilience and the importance of paying it forward. And so I walked away, free from their shadows, finally understanding that my worth had always been inherent, not something to be earned or bestowed. I have built my own empire and I am finally free. Satisfied? Imagine your own comeback, share your story. This wasn't just revenge, it was growth. Create your success. Now go write your ending, success story.